Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Municipality of Monroeville Zoning Hearing Board meeting for Wednesday, September 6th, 2023. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Sharon, may I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Grisiak?
Here?
Mr. DiAugustino?
Here.
Mrs. Wilkins?
Here.
Mr. Gatos?
Here.
Mr. Hutchison?
Here.
Mr. Dice?
Here.
Mr. Weldon?
Here.
Thank you. Before I ask for approval of minutes, I just want to compliment Sharon on an excellent job. We had a marathon session last month, and all 16 pages, to me, look in good order. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or corrections for the minutes? You have a motion?
Motion to approve?
A second?
I'll second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. As we did last month, we're going to move the two new items up to the head of the pack here, and just so the residents can go on their merry way after we decide those two items. So Paul, first item, please.
First item under new business, 23-28-A, CLASS. Applicant requests a dimensional variance from section 207.8 of the Monroeville zoning ordinance number 1443 as amended to increase the size of an existing driveway beyond the maximum permissible 25% of the front yard. The property is located at 816 Cranberry Drive, tax parcel 637G179 in the R2 one-family residential zoning district.
Very fine, thank you. Is the applicant present, please? Please come forward. Could you please sign in and state your name for the secretary, please?
Yes, my name is Gene Corona. I am Director of Facilities for Class Community Living and Support Services.
Yeah. You've signed in? Are you? Okay.
I am.
Very good. Would you raise your right hand? In the matter before us, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please present your case.
Yes, what we are, we're a nonprofit, and we actually own the house, but everybody that lives in the house is handicapped, ADA, different variety of disabilities. All three gentlemen live in the house. They're cared for by staff. Three gentlemen, one is in a manual wheelchair and the other two are in a motorized wheelchair. So what we have is we have a need at the entranceway to bring it out towards the street. We have a temporary now. We're looking to asphalt it, make it permanent. And then we need to bring it closer towards the street, away from the house, so that they can actually come out. We can't pull a handicapped vehicle, loading vehicle, far enough up because of the garage door to where they can actually get on. So they're actually loading in the street now.
Understood.
So that it's a cul-de-sac and it impedes the traffic and so forth in the neighborhood. Not that there's a lot of traffic, but it does. So we're looking to do that, and we're also looking to wind it for that same exact reason, pulling a big handicap van in there or small bus, dropping a lift down, it comes out another 6-7 feet width of the bus or van. So that's kind of our need at this time.
Understood. Anything else?
No, pretty much that's it.
Paul, have we had any correspondence from any neighbors?
None.
Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak for or against this matter? Seeing none, any questions from anybody on the board? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, second, please.
I'll second that motion.
Motion and second, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good luck with your project. Thank you. Next item, Paul.
Second item is 23-29-A, Atif Imran. Applicant requests a dimensional variance from section 2073 lot and yard requirements of the Monroeville zoning ordinance number 1443 as amended to install a deck that will encroach approximately 6 feet into the required 10-foot side yard setback for accessory structures. The property address is 1317 Knollwood Drive, tax parcel 979-R-326 in the R2 Single Family Residential Zoning District, and construction of the deck has begun without required permits. I've had a discussion with the applicant yesterday, and we have received some negative correspondence from neighbors, and the applicant has agreed to remove the portion of the deck that encroaches into the side yard. So there's an existing concrete deck that is permitted, and he is essentially just going to cover that concrete deck with a wooden deck, and he no longer needs the variance. So this item could be withdrawn.
And
Is the applicant here?
Yeah, is the applicant here? Would you just come forward, please? Would you swear in?
Yeah.
Would you sign in, please, and state your name for the secretary?
Atif Imran,
You need a spelling? She has, okay.
ATIFIMRAN.
Thank you. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm in the matter before us to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Do you wish to withdraw the application?
Yes, after I see all the neighbors, they are concerned. I just wanted to make it good for the neighborhood, but I don't want to upset my neighbors. So
Okay.
we will just go where the existing deck is, we will just cover that and just build along our house, we will not encroach
Okay.
towards the neighbors.
So then a motion would be in order then to grant the withdrawal of this application.
I'll ask for a motion to that effect, to withdraw the application,
Grant the withdrawal.
to grant the withdrawal.
Before there's a vote, I think there's some
Oh,
neighbors
I'm
here.
sorry.
Would anybody like to say anything?
He needs to be sworn in.
Yep.
Good evening.
Good evening. Would you sign in, please? And
I already did.
okay, would you raise your right hand?
I,
Do you swear or affirm in the matter before us to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your case.
Okay.
What's your name?
name?
Yes, the name is Ismail Cole. It's ISMAIL, and the last name is Cole, COLE.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I'd already planned to make some arguments and, comment and so on, but since he's going to withdraw, there's no need for me really to go through all of that. And I think his decision to withdraw is considerate, and I think it's a good idea, really. And I think it would be the best solution, really, for all the those who have a stake in the matter itself, And yes, you mentioned the neighbors, and I know the neighbors have been involved in all of this. But one final point I really want to make is a comment or two about the neighbors themselves. And the neighbors have been fantastic at being neighbors. And I personally have not had any issues with them at all. And in fact, when we moved in, I think now it's over 16 years ago, they were very welcoming. And in fact, I remember the very first day when we moved in, neighbors brought in cookies and milk and you name it, and which we appreciated very well because we had not set up anything else in the house. And so I couldn't ask for better neighbors, really. And I've also not had any problems with Atif Imran's family at all. And in fact, we've had a lot of good.
Friendly relationship.
Yeah, right. It's friendly, respectful, and everything else, So it's unfortunate that this thing came this far, so.
When we
but
started this project, we didn't realize that what kind of a complexities we are getting into. We started the project thinking, okay, we are just making the deck bigger, not knowing like there's a law, we cannot go closer to the neighbor's fence. And I mean, I wish I knew if someone could have came forward at that point and say, listen, we have some objections. If you go back, we could have been in this predicament right now. It could have been resolved. I mean, and the work could have been done by now. I mean, I have my contractor sitting over here for almost a month and a half. I mean, it's just like chaos. we just wanted to wrap it up and move on with our lives. And we don't want to encroach, we don't want to hurt nobody, we don't want to upset any any of our neighbors, and we just wanted to live happily with them and grow older. That's
very
pretty
good.
much it.
Admittedly, when he started with that, we were really not paying that much attention to it. And what caught our attention was when those, was it 10-footer or 12-foot deck pole
posts
went
going
up?
up.
Yeah,
Post,
that,
yes.
yeah, that really caught our attention.
That's actually
And,
scared everybody, including me, because they didn't have them in stock. Whatever they had, we were in a hurry and we grabbed the 16-footers. I mean, it looks like we are building a three-story
Treehouse.
building over
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And we are just trying to put an awning and that's it. I mean, we will move back, we will just follow the protocol, whatever the borough has or municipality has.
Very fine. Mr. Cole, thank you for your comments.
Yes, well, final comment,
Yes.
if I will. I was going to say, well, when we were operating under this, my impression, understanding was that the required permits have already been obtained and so on, and that sort of influenced what I was doing. Later on, again, we don't have to rehash the whole thing here, but we'd even gone to the extent of making some kind of a meeting halfway deal and everything else. And it was really Paul's letter, I think, that made the difference, because when that came in and I saw that, in fact, the permit were not obtained and no prior, let's say, a request was made for, for variance, that's what, change everything on
Permit
the
was
ground.
applied, but the thing was, the project was started, I mean,
Right.
under the impression that it's gonna be approved and it's gonna be permitted. And we started it without the permit, but not knowing, like, permit has to have it in hand before you can start the work. So we were well aware of that. Soon we were told, we stopped the work immediately, very same day. I mean, after that, no work has been done, it's been there, that's it.
Very good.
Yeah, that's all under.
Anything else?
Let's go on this,
Thank you very
resolve it
much.
amicably, I think that's good.
Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you for your kind consideration.
Yep, no problem.
Have we
Thank you.
voted?
Thanks
have
for your
not.
time.
We have not, we need to vote.
I believe you have a motion and a second.
There's no motion.
There is no motion? Okay. A motion's in order to approve the withdrawal.
Correct.
I'll make a motion for the approval withdrawal.
Second?
I'll second.
Motion and seconded, all in favor? Say aye. Aye. Thank you very much again.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you, any other neighbors that came out. Anybody else have anything to speak on this matter? It's the way it's supposed to work, folks. Yes, you're welcome to leave if,
All right, gentlemen, thank you.
thank you, have a good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Let's give a minute here. Paul?
Okay, the next 10 items
The
are,
next 6 items, or next 5 items. We had testimony on the last 5, or the first 5.
okay,
I believe we're going to have testimony tonight on 6 through 10. Am I right about that, Paul?
correct. I was just going to say that the items were tabled
Yes.
last month. We
It's
listened.
tabled till tonight.
Correct. And we heard the presentation for the first 5.
Right.
The second 5 are to take place tonight. And we had some discussions with the applicant about abbreviating or,
Well, that's, I was going to ask about that.
okay,
You can, yeah, I think we said last month, as well as we'll say it again tonight, we'll incorporate the testimony that you gave last month into this next 6 through 10. I think it's substantially the same issues, same kind of testimony we would be hearing. So you don't have, if you choose to, you don't have to go through that all again. And so I'm ruling that that testimony will be incorporated into the 6 through 10 of your applications tonight. A fair statement?
That works for us, Mr. Dice. The only thing I'd add is we do still have a few witnesses left. I think we need to briefly recall one of our witnesses from
Okay.
last time.
Okay.
We have 2
I
additional
understand that.
witnesses on the first 5.
I understand that.
Is there anybody who's speaking tonight who was not sworn in
is one.
last time?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that.
Why don't you stand up and raise your right hand?
You swear affirm on the matter before us to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Would you state your name, please? for the
David
record?
Lamberger. David Lamberger. Lamberger.
And have you signed in?
Yes, I did.
Okay, very good. If you're not going to speak right now, And anybody who else was sworn in, you're still under oath. Very good.
Everybody understands that. You're still under oath.
Did you take an oath last time? You did, okay, yeah, okay. Everybody else is under oath, Your Honor.
You are, sir, right?
I am not under.
Are you going to
No.
speak?
Yes.
Okay, would you please rise? Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm in the matter before us to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And your name, please?
Patrick Wolfington,
And
Wolfington.
and have you signed in?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Gall?
And once again, we do have a few more exhibits, if I could distribute those to the board.
Oh, jolly.
Okay. So,
I want a book bag.
This ain't so bad.
This is one of many, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
and the other two, we do have two of those exhibits. I believe they are 15 and 16 are documents that the board requested. 15 is a rendering of the site. And 16 is a site plan with the mile markers on it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I'm sorry, 16 is a copy of the site plan, but with the mile markers for line 376 on it.
Thank you.
I appreciate that reference. It was tough to figure out exactly where the billboards were proposed. Thank you.
And particularly, and actually, West 17 is also an exhibit that the board requested. You'll see it in both the exhibit book for this site and the exhibit book for the other site, but it is an aerial view of the stretch of the parkway from mile marker 82.5 through mile marker 83 with the two billboards located. And Exhibit 18 is Mr. Lamberger's CV. So, as to Exhibit 15, I would ask to recall Mr. Schwartz to discuss how exactly this exhibit was prepared.
Mr. Gall, anybody that you presented their credentials in the past, or last meeting that we accepted as being expert, you don't have to repeat that.
We won't. Fair enough. Mr. Schwartz, you testified at the previous evening of this hearing?
Yes.
Okay, and you understand that you're still under oath here?
Yes.
Were you involved in the preparation of the document we're looking at as Exhibit 15?
Yes.
And what are these pages, I believe it's 4 pages, what are these pages
4
intended to
pages.
show?
What we understood the board wanted to have was some sort of illustration, just sometimes it's hard to visualize what's on a plan, get it into a photo in some way. So what we did is basically build almost like a 3-dimensional model, terrain model, using the topography from the survey and a little kit of parts in terms of components like a billboard, and then drape that over top of a photo so that we could literally import, made this a little simpler than it actually is, but imported those elements into the photo. So kind of just mashed them together, so to speak. And the point was to be able to give you, in this case, two views of what the current ordinance is, what those standards are, in comparison to the requested variances. So sometimes we'll do this type of analysis for existing condition and then proposed conditions, so you see the before and after. That's not really what the issue is. What we were trying to demonstrate was the kind of the impact of the current standards that are in the ordinance relative to visibility, to safety, those types of things, as opposed to what the proposed variance is. So the first one, if you look at the upper left corner, we tried to make this print as small as possible to challenge anybody. You all have glasses just like me. So if you'll see, we're talking west side.
Can I interrupt? just
Yeah.
quick? If, for the presentation, keep that flat
Got
on the
it.
table.
Let's do that.
I'm sorry.
In fact,
That way the
we're
camera.
gonna need this
I'm sorry.
at some point.
So you look at that upper left corner, you'll see west side. We'll have a discussion about the east side as well. And then there's the 700 feet dimension. So what we tried to do was capture a view that was based on the previous evening's testimony in terms of travel time. You know, there was that discussion, how many seconds at the highway speed, et cetera. That's, when you do the math, that's what equated to the 700 feet. So what we were trying to simulate is if you were a motorist, where you would see that billboard, where you would see that outdoor advertising sign. So on the first one, which is headed towards, facing towards Pittsburgh, you'll see under the current ordinance, there's just a tiny little triangle because of the way that topography falls down the hillside. Now, that's based on a 10-foot setback, again, in the notion of you have a 24-foot high structure. Now, that is counted from the top of road. So when we went back to the terrain model, it's not just the contour along the side slope falling, in this case, down the hillside. We're able, because the way the code reads, the height is measured from the actual road surface. So we had to use the elevation of the road surface in that particular area. So the 3D model, again, gives us a pretty high level of accuracy in terms of when we do that simulation. When you look at the sister or brother image to this, so that's the one with the requested variances. Can I flip it, Paul?
Yeah. And if you look at the monitor, you can see it on the monitor, and you can.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to keep track of. So on the requested variance, you'll see this billboard is now visible. Why you couldn't see on the first image, there's a little hill that is in the way. If you go flip back to the first image, that billboard disappears behind topography, which is actually a part of the PennDOT right-of-way. That's not anything that's under the control of the property owner or the potential lease. That's all within the right-of-way. And there's a grade change there, a little bump of about 15 feet. 15 to 20 feet is about what it is. Hence, when that billboard is set at the dimensions you guys have, it sits really low to the road. Wouldn't be visible until you almost got into the middle or just past that hill, and all of a sudden it's there. And the height of it would be almost akin to those construction signs that you see that say merge left, or, you know, construction starting on September 30th or something like that. You actually have one on the other side of the boulevard out here in the laydown area. You know, when you leave today, that's about what that 150 square feet is. That, from I think everybody's perspective, is something that may become a distraction. Whereas if we're able to elevate this above the hill, so as that motorist is traveling and sees the advertisement, the sign face itself straight on, that is what Michael was trying to get at in terms of positioning where structures are best positioned. The second set of images.
Actually, Mr. Schwartz, before we do that, could you go back to the first page and just take the pen that's there and circle the billboard?
Yep.
And maybe draw a star and an arrow pointing to your circle?
In the middle, you'll see a little gray triangle there.
And we're going to mark this as Exhibit West 19.
That's the portion of billboard, based on the current requirements, that would actually be visible.
Okay. And could you do the same thing? Could you, it's a little more obvious, but could you circle the billboard on the next page of West 19? Now, if you want to go into the other images, sorry to interrupt.
Does this become West 20? We're doing 19, 20, 21, 22, or just the whole packet's West 19?
We'll just mark, the exhibit that he's marking, which was a copy of West 15, but now that he's marked it, I think I now have to give it a different number.
Okay.
So
I just for,
we'll give her the original when we're done here.
just for the court
Yeah.
reporter's purposes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
But to his point, this was probably 20 then, since I marked it.
Well, let's, I think we can keep them all as one if you're marking all 4 pages.
Okay, if you flip to the third sheet, so this is now looking eastbound, so this is looking back towards Monroeville itself. Again, up at the top, you'll see it's at a distance from the billboard of about 700 feet. That's based on travel speed, as well as that time of kind of visibility. That is the ideal. You could see on the left side of the road, so that'll be the lanes facing us in the photo, you'll see the highway sign, and there's a gray rectangle that's immediately adjacent to it. That rectangle is based on the current standard. So again, this first image on the kind of the eastbound view is showing the current standard.
That's the backside of it.
That is the backside. So to your point, all 4 of these images are the same sign location. It's just looking at it from 2 different directions.
The first 2 are the front views and
Yep.
the next 2 are the back
Yep.
views.
And which sign, how do we have identified? We have 2 billboards.
The west.
This is
the
west.
west side.
Okay, that's right.
Yep,
That's the
all 4
W.
images are west side. Good question.
It's labeled eastbound. Oh, west side eastbound,
Yes,
okay.
eastbound direction.
Yeah, it's westbound.
If you flip,
And why
then,
don't you circle the billboard in that too, just to be consistent?
and I apologize, it's 750 feet on this one. Okay, flipping to the 4th one, again,
Just so I know, the third one is built to our standards, is that right?
built to your standards. So the 4th one is now the required, or the requested variance. 750 feet, everything is taken for the same vantage point, and again, I'll circle it. This one is more obvious. Now, the height, when you're looking at it from this side, one would say, well, that's up there. Well, to his question earlier, it's being driven by the westbound view because that hill is in the way. So in order to have it be visible or not pose confusion with a motorist for other types of signs, if you go back to that image 2, it was suggesting to bring it up above that hill. That is then the same structure. So on the kind of the eastbound, it's a little bit different vantage point, but the height of everything, it's exactly the same because it's the same sign structure. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, I have a question. So when I'm looking at it, it still looks like it's in front of the directional sign, the pole.
No, it may be an optical illusion. You may not be picking it up. There's quite a bit of spacing from that directional sign. You're talking the back of the highway sign, the silvery looking thing?
Yeah,
The Penn Hill sign, probably.
It probably is a Penn Hill sign.
that is the Penn Hills exit sign.
It is on the Max Construction side of that sign. There's no question.
So that sign that you have on the 4th page, that sign's not going to impede on the Penn Hills exit sign at all?
No. Flip back to the image number 2.
That's what I'm looking at right now.
So you'll see the Penn Hill sign is below it, right, at that point. At that distance, you're not reading the content of that sign. You can't see those letters. Again, DOT uses similar kind of thought process. The size of letters is set for certain speeds and certain visibility distances. So at that point, where Where that text probably begins to become legible is about where you would be even in a car with the actual billboard itself.
Just curious, what's the distance between the proposed sign and the Penn Hill sign? Is it 200 feet, 300 feet? Do you have any, just,
I don't remember. It's probably about 200 feet.
200 feet or so?
Yeah, yeah. I'd have to look that up and give you a definitive answer, because I don't remember right off the top of my head, but
Since we were talking about that, I just figured.
it's about, my guess is it's about 200 feet.
Feet, okay.
Can you see it on this?
No,
I don't know. I can't glean it, but no. Okay.
Yes, that's probably the Penn Hill sign.
Right around there, okay. So, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's over 300 feet.
yeah, it's like Tim's calculated, it's over 300 feet.
It's also the PennDOT signs in the PennDOT right away, or signs not, so they're.
Okay.
You need to make that all clear. So when we say the existing municipal standard, that sign face edge is at the 10 feet, okay, from the property line. The requested variances are showing that 2 feet from the property line. So it's everything that we're simulating. If we were fortunate to get the variance, this is the way it would be cited on the property. It is not in the right-of-way. So that road sign, the green sign, the Penn Hill sign, is actually in the right-of-way. There's always separation in terms of X and Y geometry from those signs.
Thank you.
Mr. Schwartz, I think those are all the questions I have for you on this. I don't know if the board or Mr. Dice have any additional questions.
Well, let me ask you. Are you saying that you can build a conforming sign, but you don't like the height, you don't like the view that you would get because it's not big enough? Is that in summary what you're saying?
No. I think if you go back to the first one. So the first one is showing the sign standard that you currently have,
Right?
right? And I think what we're trying to illuminate is, as a motorist, I don't.
I'm not worried about being a motorist here. I just want to know, could you build that sign?
I think that standard, the way it's drafted in the ordinance and applied to the site, actually becomes more of a nuisance than elevating the sign. I think it remedies what potentially.
Try answering my question. Could you build it? Could it conform?
No, because of the previous exhibits, I can't cite it on the property, given all the challenges with the terrain and the
Challenges to
floodplain.
you and your client, right?
Well, I think there are hardships related to
You
applying
want to call them
standards.
hardships?
I think the
Okay.
floodplain and.
Okay,
yes.
just so I just want to
Yes.
understand it.
Yes,
And am I right that you are proposing signs that are 450% bigger than what's permitted under our ordinance?
you did fast
If
math.
I do the math right.
You did fast math, yeah, four times, yes,
450% bigger than
Yes.
what's permitted.
yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that there's a yard requirement of 10 feet. You're going to encroach into the requirement that's under the ordinance by 8 feet, am I right?
Not for the post, for the elevated, the cantilever sign face.
Okay. So in essence, you'll only have 20% of the side, the yard requirement that will be in existence. You'll encroached 80% into it.
Yes, on that cantilever portion.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you.
We give this to you now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Our next witness is David Lamberger.
He's the only one I didn't get a card from.
We do have a spelling. He could spell it for you if that's helpful.
That's
Yeah, I'm retired now, my cards don't matter.
Sure they do.
Hi, my name's David Lamberger, I'm retired, 40 years in the outdoor advertising industry.
And Mr. Lamberger, can you spell your name for the record?
Lamberger.
And you're here to testify about the business of selling advertising space on billboards and what's necessary to do it
Yes.
profitably.
Yes.
You said you're retired. What was your position immediately before you retired?
I was president of Clear Channel Outdoor in Philadelphia for the last 8 years.
When did you retire?
June 30th, and I'm glad to be home.
And as president of Clear Channel Outdoor, what were you responsible for
I was, well,
in Philadelphia?
overall financial success, cash flow for the company, but that entails running 4 different departments, operational, which installs, maintains, builds signs, to the sales team that brings in the revenue, to our real estate department that handles our portfolio of assets, maintaining, growing, like the gentleman here we built signs in Philadelphia. We also kept the ones that we had. It was an older market. We had many signs in Philadelphia. We're the largest outdoor provider in Philadelphia. And then working with finance, of course. So 60 employees we had. We were a union shop, so dealt with union negotiations as well. There wasn't much I haven't done in this business over 40 years. But
What was the revenue of the Philadelphia region? Philadelphia region?
it was just a
Philadelphia
branch.
sector? Branch, Philadelphia
Our
branch.
footprint was southeastern PA, southern Jersey, and Delaware. Goal this year was $55 million.
And was that fairly consistent with goals in previous years?
No, they like to jump it up 5 to 6% every year and make it tough.
Right. And what did you do in this position?
Oh, no, as president?
Yep. Who did you interact
Well,
with?
Clients, first of all. If you have revenue, you don't have cash flow. So I was definitely talking to clients, agencies, advertisers. Being in Philadelphia, we were an hour from New York. I took the train to New York a lot to see the larger advertisers as well and agencies. But you had to work with our public officials. We were very community-oriented, very tight with our state senators and reps. Did a lot of community involvement stuff, but and then a lot of administrative stuff as president. I was running a show of $55 million with 60 people. So.
Did you ever work with sign vendors?
Oh, sure. Sure. I mean, Clear Channel we had a procurement company, but yes, we worked with them on costs, working on different costs if we could. Yeah, to delivery to everything else, of course.
Did you work with engineers?
Yes, actually worked with Michael as well. We hired Michael a lot as well.
Okay. And did you have your own site selection department? Was that outsourced?
I was our real estate department, yes. I had a team of 6 people in real estate.
You mentioned that you were in Philadelphia for 18 years?
Yes.
Were you with Clear Channel before that?
I started with Clear Channel here in Pittsburgh. Clear Channel won the contract with the city of Pittsburgh to develop the bus shelters you see in the city. And I worked with Deputy Mayor and the council folks and on placement by the council district, what would help the people, because we were giving them the amenities, and we also revenue shared. So we had to build, the contract was for 250 shelters, and then I left there because they asked me to come to Philadelphia to be the vice president of sales. So,
When did you start with Clear Channel in Pittsburgh?
2000, May of 2000,
And you moved to Philadelphia in?
2004.
Where did you work before Clear Channel?
Well, I was in New York with P&E. There's a long list. I mean, we could be here for a while.
What was your job with P&E?
I was vice president, general manager of the New York market. So I sold and also managed operations and such for the New York market for P&E.
Was that also outdoor advertising?
Yes, traditional outdoor advertising. And prior to that, I was with, which is now Lamar, which was Martin Outdoor at the time. Then we got sold to Chancellor. Actually, I hired Matt Wolf back there, who's with Lamar. So, and I was vice president of sales there.
Okay. When did you start with,
Well,
you said it was Martin before?
it was Martin and it was Patrick before then. In the outdoor business, the major companies buy a lot, especially back in the 80s and 90s. There was a lot of consolidation in purchasing. And then before that, I ran the buses for the Port Authority with Gannett. And prior to that, I was just a kid selling in at the Foster and Kaiser Patrick Media Market. And then I went back as the regional president, or regional sales manager, so. But I've been in Pittsburgh out of my 40 years, 22 of them, so.
Okay. When did you start with Foster and Kaiser?
1984. 83, excuse me, November 83, yeah.
What were you doing before that?
Trying to finish school.
Where was that?
Pitt. I graduated University of Pittsburgh with a Bachelor of Arts and Sciences in Communications.
Okay. To be clear, you're not an engineer by training.
No, no.
Are you involved in any professional organizations related to outdoor advertising?
I was on the board of directors for the State Association of Pennsylvania, which it's called the OAP, the Outdoor Association of Pennsylvania. And yeah, back in the day, I was also board of directors of the Pittsburgh Ad Club.
Do you have any professional certifications?
Yeah, yes, I am a certified professional sales skills trainer. It's multifaceted, but it's a 3-day session where we bring in new salespeople and sit them down and teach them the fundamentals of sales. Not only outdoor, but all sales itself.
Any awards from the Pittsburgh Ad Club?
Yeah, I won a couple of OB awards.
What are OB awards?
They're the advertising, you have a great ad. So your great ad won an award. So the artists and the creative folks decide on who wins by categories and such.
And any other awards related to your professional activities?
Just internal ones with the company for, financial achievements, leadership, such and such.
In the course of your 40 years in the billboard industry, do you think you've learned what it takes to sell advertising space on a billboard?
Yeah, I have. Yes.
Very briefly, and it's probably pretty obvious from everything you've said, how did you learn that?
Well, I had some great mentors as a youngster, but through the School of Hard Knocks too, just learning and going out and knocking on doors to developing a sales team and managing a sales team and what works and what doesn't work. But it's the fundamentals of basic sales, but know what your clients want. That's what it's about in all advertising sales. Is you have to know what the advertiser's target audience is, what they're trying to achieve with their marketing message, and how we can place the sign or signs that they're looking for, either if they're targeting demographically, geographically, and believe it or not, now we can even target behaviorally. So it's transformed itself over the years.
Okay. And in the course of your time in the industry, have you learned what it takes to develop a billboard on which the owner can expect to turn a profit?
Yes, yes.
How did you learn about that?
Well, watching the people when I was younger, always watching to see the people that did it right and did it well. And then when I became president, at Clear Channel, we had certain guidelines. We had probably a 50-point checklist that we had to go over. But it basically comes down to what's your return on investment based upon the capital, all the expenses you have based upon your projected revenue. And at Clear Channel, we had a certain number to hit, or the project would just get scrapped.
Now, we talked about return on investment and ROI. Does your experience also extend to determining whether a project or a particular sign would be profitable at all?
Yes. Yes, for the fact that for us to go through our capital committee at Clear Channel, you had to have those 50 points done, and you had to make sure that the return on investment was there, because we also, besides Philadelphia, had 26 other markets that were looking for the same amount of capital. So, Los Angeles might have a deal that was bringing in a better ROI, and if you only have so much limited capital, they put you in the row. How you're going to get it?
And if your ROI is 0, you're not going to get the capital.
Oh, it's even higher, you wouldn't get the capital. Sure.
But we can agree that if the ROI is 0, it's not going to happen.
No.
Okay.
Doesn't make sense.
Have the considerations into what leads to success or being able to make any profit in this industry changed at all with the rise of signs with changeable messages?
Yes, it's
How so?
actually, well, your capital investment is much larger than a traditional board. You're usually, to put something of that value, you're looking for limited access highways, different arterials, because to get your ROI, you have to make sure where the traffic counts are and the demand are high. It's not like big difference is, it would cost less to build a board on Butler Street than it would be to be on the Parkway.
At this point, we'd offer Mr. Lamberger as an expert on the billboard industry and the elements necessary to develop a billboard site profitably?
Well, it comes down to
One
basically.
second, yep, they have
Oh,
to
sorry.
accept it.
Okay, so I think you said it right. So he's being offered to comment on the profitability of signs, these signs.
Yes,
Okay.
Whether a sign can make a profit, yes.
Okay.
but it usually.
Whatever relevance that is, good.
Okay.
You're
Well, what I was
an
gonna get-
expert on that.
Well, the point is, and, you know, some of the litmus tests that we talked about earlier, besides the 50 points are, but it basically comes down to, do you have a significant visibility of an arterial, and is the size on that road going to be appropriate, that the motorist will see it to recall the message? Because on a smaller sign, the creative just doesn't work. It just won't work, and the recall wouldn't be there. I mean, Edgar Snyder's message would not work on a 150-foot sign.
What do you mean by creative? Can you explain that for the board?
Well, creative is the message that sells. Through my career, I could have given clients the best locations in the world, but their creative stunk. And then they said, oh, it didn't work because their message was horrible. You couldn't read it. No one could recall it. I don't know, I mean, I'm old though, but if you remember years and years ago, one of the best signs I ever saw was Joe Said It Would. Remember Joe DiNardo was the weatherman? And Joe Said It Would was probably one of the most memorable ones you can recall. So that's what sells. That's what's memorable. When you have memory, you have recall. So when clients go to make a purchase, they have the recall. And that's what we do for our advertisers.
So what factors affect the amount for which an owner can sell space on a billboard?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
What factors affect how much an owner can sell space for on a billboard? You
Again,
mentioned,
Definitely, I mean, the size of the sign. I mean, our regulatory company is called Geopath. When we sell to advertisers, everything's done by impressions. Each sign is given an impression based upon a certain demographic. And believe it or not, the bigger the sign is, closer it is to the road, the higher impression level it has than a smaller sign that's further away from the road. It makes sense, but at least it's verified and audited by this company. So that's what our advertisers are looking for.
now the site we're here on this evening is located between the Parkway and Old William Penn Highway, between the exits for Route 48 and Rhode Island Road. Are you familiar with that site?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you reviewed any of the maps and diagrams that were prepared for this case?
All of them.
You've seen the site plan?
I saw the site plan and I went to the site on Sunday.
What did you do when you were there on Sunday?
Looked at the topography, looked at the area to build, and it's going to be an impressive build.
How so?
Well, it's not going to be easy, but Mr. Tantella's work and it's viable. It's going to be it should be a very good sign.
Okay. So, and you are familiar with the limited access highways in the Pittsburgh area?
Yes, sir.
And I think you've already mentioned this, limited access highways are common locations for billboards.
Yes.
Where do you live now?
I live in Murraysville now.
And how long have you lived there full-time?
2 months full-time. Prior to that, I was back and forth for 18 years.
Okay. And for how long have you been visiting the eastern suburbs? Before you moved back here 2 months ago, before you moved
Well,
to
I married a girl
Philadelphia.
from Penn Hills, and
Okay.
so a lot.
Okay. So, since you retired, how often have you traveled that stretch of the Parkway?
Every day.
And while you were working in the Pittsburgh market, how frequently do you think you traveled that stretch of the Parkway?
Probably twice a week or so. There was always meetings out here, and clients to see.
Do you know that that area is posted for 55 miles an hour?
Yeah.
Would you be surprised that there's evidence in this matter that the average speed on that stretch is actually closer to 70?
I agree with that 100%.
I'd like you to assume for the moment that the Monroeville zoning code allows an owner to build a billboard at this site, but the sign size is limited to 150 square feet. The dimensions are limited to no more than 15 feet by 10 feet, and the sign can't be more than 24 feet above the road from which it's to be viewed. Now, if you have those restrictions and what you know of that site, Can anyone in the billboard industry profitably develop a sign at that site subject to those restrictions?
No way.
Why not?
Yeah, 10 by 150 is not going to make the revenue that a 14 by 48 would be. And your cost of the capital is this will sustain to build your bridge and build your pole and do your foundation. And you're probably going to get maybe a quarter, at that size, I would say maybe less than 25% of the rate if you would have a 672 square foot sign.
I didn't hear the last part.
A 14 by 48 will drive at least three to four times more than the rate you would with 150. Quite frankly, no one would probably buy it, going 70 miles an hour at a 10 by 15. Because you can't do the creative. The creative would be illegible going at that speed, at 70 miles an hour. And here's another factor too, folks, that I should bring up too. The standard size of the industry is the 14 by 48. I mean, from California to Maine down to Miami. The development and the purchasing of these digital signs, they're just fabricating in 14 by 48. So your cost of a 10 by 150 is not off the rack. You'd have to pay for it. So your cost per square foot is a heck of a lot higher than it would be on a 14 by 48. And you're still going through all the capital expense for everything else, through everything that we talked about so far. But national advertisers, the Verizons of the world, the AT&Ts of the world, the State Farms of the world, that spend the big money in the industry, they do their creative based on 14 by 48s or the 672. They are not going to pay an artist $500 an hour to do one sign for 10 by 150 in Monroeville. They're just not. And quite frankly, Lamar has one up the street, they would buy that because they're just not going to change the creative. So the opportunities for sale are diminished at least 50%. Because you're not going to get those national advertisers. You're not even going to get the larger local advertisers to do it.
So 15 by 10 wouldn't work at that site, correct?
No.
Now, as we've discussed, we're talking about a sign that's 672 square feet, and you've mentioned that that's an industry standard. But do you have an opinion as to whether you could put a smaller sign on that site with a reasonable expectation of turning any profit?
I don't think anything smaller would be viable financially.
You mentioned 672 as a standard size. Are there other standard sizes of billboards?
Yes, one state association allows up to 1,200 square feet, 20 by 60s. Philadelphia, being a Class A city prior to, I had signs that were 20 by 80, 49 by 196. We had some monsters in the city. But majority of my 700 bulletins that I had in the marketplace, majority are still 14 by 48s.
Okay. So you mentioned 20 by 60, that's 1,200 square feet. There's also a 960 square foot standard size?
Yeah, it was very popular in New Jersey. It was 16 by 60.
Okay. Are there any standard sizes that are smaller than 672 square feet?
Yes, there's 10.6 by 36 on the, on the bulletin size. And then in the poster panels, the ones there, you can still, they're 12 by 25s.
Do you think a 10.6 by 36, that's about 378 square feet?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that would work at this site?
No.
Why not?
Again, we're talking about diminished profits, diminished returns on your investment. You're not going to get the same rates as you would with the 14 by 48.
Okay.
The impressions will be smaller because the size is smaller, and the clients pay by what they call cost per thousand, which is a cost for how many thousand eyeballs I get. So you're not going to get the same.
Is it possible to order a sign or to get a sign from a fabricator in a size other than these standard sizes that we've discussed?
Yes, but you pay premiums
Why is that?
because they're not off the rack. It's just think about if you were buying a car, if you're, well, that's probably not a good example, but anything that's not off the rack, you're going to have to pay because they're going to have to reconfigure, because the digital sign is really a computer. So you're going to reconfigure how that computer is going to work in a 10 by 150 or a 10.6 by 36 compared to a 14 by 48.
Is there any change in the price with one of these non-standard signs due to the decrease in the sign area? For instance, if you ordered a sign that was 300 square feet or 450 square feet, would you pay less than you would for a 672 square foot
Yes,
sign?
because of the size, yes. But per square foot, you're going to pay a premium.
And you're not going to realize the same revenue from it?
That's correct.
Okay. And again, those would be non-standard sizes?
That's correct. Well, 12 by 25 would be, and so would the 10 6 by 36, but you're paying a premium per square foot, you're getting less revenue. So, and you're paying the same amount of capital to build the pool, the foundation, and everything else. So your profits are going to be lower because your rate's not going to be the same.
Okay. Now, the 10 6 by 36 that you talked about, are those typically placed on roads like the Parkway?
No.
Where do those usually go?
If I would make an example here in Pittsburgh, you could probably do it on, again, let's say West Carson Street, East Carson Street, Butler Street, more what I would call secondary arterials.
And if you get a smaller sign, does that reduce the site development cost for a site like the one we're talking about?
Just for the cost of the face, but everything else would be the same.
So you'd still have the same capital cost for putting in the bridge and doing the other work on the
Yes,
site?
for this specific site, you bet.
So is it your opinion that a 672 square foot sign is the smallest sign that could grant relief that somebody could develop at any profit at all on that site?
Definitely.
And the opinions you've expressed here about the inadequacy of the 150 square foot sign and the need for the 672 square foot sign, do you hold those opinions to a reasonable degree of certainty based on your experience in the billboard industry?
Yes, sir, I do.
Those are all the questions I have for you right now, sir. The board may have some questions.
A couple. So I understand, if the sign's not big enough, you can't make as much profit. The bigger the sign, the more profit.
Your rates would be higher, so yes, your profit would be, your revenue would be higher.
I mean, that's what you're.
That's exactly what I'm
Am I right
saying.
in what I said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you ever testified in a variance hearing in front of a zoning hearing board?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell me what profit has to do with hardship. Remember, we're talking about hardship of the property. That's what's
Well, in this
before us.
specific case, I would say that there's not much else you could do with that plot, that lot that you have there. So, I mean, the only viable product that you could put on that lot would be a billboard.
So you're saying no other uses could be put on that lot?
I don't think so. I don't think a retail outlet can be put on that little parcel.
Seems to me there was testimony last time from one of your people that said that there is an area there that can be developed in accordance with the zoning ordinance.
Well,
Just for the record, I need to object to that question.
Okay.
It's misstating the testimony.
So,
I've rode both sites, and I don't see a ice cream shop being profitable there. I don't see anything with that small.
here's what I'm driving at. What does profit have to do with hardship on the land? If you can't make enough money, then it's not worth doing it. I understand that.
Right.
Are you saying that that creates a hardship of the land because you can't make enough money?
I don't know how to answer that.
Well, here's how you could answer it. Yes, that's right. That's what you're saying.
When you're talking about probably, now, I haven't seen the capital figures, you're probably talking about 7 figures of capital investment to make this happen. To come out at zero doesn't make it viable.
Okay. So really, most of your testimony tonight is about the viability, the profitability of doing this project with these larger signs.
Yes.
Okay. Smaller signs, you can't make as much profit.
People aren't going to buy a 10 by 15.
So the answer to my question is
Yes.
yes. Okay, all right, that's all.
Is it your opinion that you expressed here tonight, or I may be misstating your opinion, is it your opinion here this evening that if you had a 150 square foot sign, you couldn't possibly make any profit at all at that site?
None.
Okay. That is your opinion?
That is my opinion.
And is it your opinion that if you were trying to establish the commercial use of a billboard on the site that we're talking about, it wouldn't be viable with a sign that's less than the 672 square foot size that we're discussing?
That's correct as well.
And it wouldn't be profitable at a size smaller than that?
No, it would not.
Okay, and it would be a commercial use that would make no profit.
That's correct.
I don't have any further questions. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome home.
Thanks. Feels good.
I'd like to call Mr. Wolfington now. Mr. Wolfington, you were sworn in earlier.
Yes,
Can you state your name for the board and tell us your business address?
yes. Patrick Wolfington, business address 500 Office Center Drive, Fort Washington, PA, Suite 400, 19034.
Who do you work for, Mr. Wolfington?
I'm a principal and partner at Wolfgate Devco LLC.
And what is Wolfgate Devco LLC?
Wolfgate Devco LLC is a company that develops off-premise billboard signage.
How long have you been involved in the billboard industry yourself?
Myself, over 15 years.
Can you tell us what you've done during that time?
Yes. So in the current position at Wolfgate Devco, as well as a previous company, I was a partner and founder and partner. We developed outdoor assets and pretty much ran the gamut from start to finish. And what I mean by that is site selection, finding a site that's viable, securing that real estate either through lease or purchase, reviewing zoning ordinances, going through the approval process, permitting, engineering, site viability, and then once a sign was approved, walk it through construction and operation. And by operation, I mean the sale of advertisement and graphics department in-house to create that ad copy.
How many signs do you think you've been, or billboards, do you think you've been involved in the development of over that time?
So in the previous company, not even including Wolfgate Devco, in a 10-year span, we developed over 50 sign structures in the Philadelphia DMA, which is the 5th largest DMA in the country. And those 50-plus signs actually turned out to be created essentially the 2nd largest digital network in Philadelphia DMA. And my two partners were also part of that company, and they were part of that process. Our combined experience is in excess of 35 years.
Excuse me, DMA is?
Sorry, demographic market area.
Thank you.
How far, what is, I think we heard prior testimony about this, but what is included in the Philadelphia DMA?
It's basically Philadelphia, surrounding counties, and portions of southern Jersey.
And well, both with Wolfgate Devco and your previous employment, did you work with other billboard companies?
We did. During that time period, we actually worked with, transacted with, co-developed, converted, meaning taking a static to digital, with the largest billboard companies in the country, the 3 largest being Outfront, Lamar, and Clear Channel.
And were you involved at all in the financing of billboard development during this time?
Yes, so over that period, we worked with 6 different lending institutions and had financed over that time in excess of $75 million worth of construction and operation.
Is it common to finance the construction and development of new billboards?
Yes.
And is that an activity in which Wolfgate Devco is still involved?
Yes, we currently work with an additional lending institution in the financing of our construction.
Now, in addition to this work, are you involved in analyzing the financial feasibility of a proposed billboard and whether it's possible to make any profit at all?
Yes.
What do you do?
We do what we've done similar here, and that's what we've done for 15-plus years, which is if you look at a given location, you're looking at multiple factors. Number one, you're looking at the current zoning. You're looking at the roadway in which it's visible from. You're looking at traffic counts. You're looking at demographics in the area. You're looking at existing inventory along that same stretch of roadway or within that general geographic area. You're looking at basically environmental conditions. What I mean by that is the built environment is a better way to say it. If you're driving along a roadway, what other structures are in the way? Is it visible? Could it be visible? going through the zoning approval process, what would the cost be? There's a lot of soft cost in addition to the hard cost of actually constructing a billboard with engineering, legal, professionals, permitting, obviously experts in traffic, in civil, and things of that nature.
Why do this analysis?
Well, there's basically two factors similar to almost any business, but in the billboard business, you have cost and you have revenue. So you look at the cost of a given project and you try to estimate. You never know until it's done, but with experience, you understand enough to know what you're getting into. And I've already cited some of those costs, but those involve the professionals, the securing of real estate if you enter into a lease or a purchase, creating the plans, the engineering. There's also operational costs. Once it's built, you have to look at what is it going to cost to operate, utility, maintain, sales, things of that nature. So that's the cost side of it. And the other side is revenue. You have to look at a given location and say, how much revenue do you think this location would derive? And that's, again, market knowledge, but also looking at that location, looking at those factors I cited before, which is visibility, legibility, traffic counts, demographics, and so forth. And you essentially look at the two and you say, is a project viable?
Once you do this analysis, do you ever find yourself taking it back to potential lenders?
Yes.
And you are familiar with the site that we're discussing here along the Parkway, correct?
Yes, I am.
In addition to putting up a sign, what improvements do you anticipate having to construct if you develop this site?
I think it's been shown in fact, I know it has some of the previous plans that have been provided in the last hearing and introduced. But essentially, to access just the area where a sign could be built, whether under the permitted or as proposed, there would have to be essentially an access way off Old William Penn Highway. There would have to be essentially a culvert put in, a temporary roadway to end up to build a permanent construction bridge that would allow for access on a consistent basis for maintenance and so forth, as well as kind of a pad area for the construction equipment once that's finished for a sign to actually be developed, i.e. the foundation secured and the faces mounted. At that point, you would remove the temporary road, the culvert, you'd have to put fill in. It's a pretty extensive process, pretty capital intensive process.
I believe Mr. Lamberger, during his testimony, said that his impression was that it would cost at least, or the cost would run into 7 figures. Reasonably accurate?
More than reasonable. There's actually a local group, Pagliano Construction Co., that we had look at the plans, and they gave us an estimate. We think we can value engineer it down, and they agreed with us with some more work put into it. But their verbal estimate for each site was about $1.2 million in just site improvement costs. That does not include the cost to construct the actual sign. And the reality is for anybody to utilize this site and to access an area that is developable, which was discussed by Mr. Schwartz earlier, that there's a very limited area that is actually developable based on all the restraints on the property. Anybody would have to put in these fixed costs in order to just access the site for any use.
So that doesn't depend on the height of the sign or the size of the sign?
That has nothing to do with it. That's a fixed cost before you get to the sign itself.
And it wouldn't change if you're putting in an ice cream parlor on that site?
Just to access the site, it would not.
These site improvements that we're talking about here, are they normal for the installation of a billboard?
No, I mean, a typical billboard, you have the actual soft and hard cost of the construction of a sign itself. On certain instances, you might have to, create a smoother roadway, whether you have to lay gravel down or so forth. But for the most part, the construction of a billboard is fixed to the actual construction of the billboard. It does not involve the site improvements that are at this location.
And we talked about lenders a little bit before, but how does Wolfgate Devco plan to finance these improvements?
So like any development project, a lender will look at a given site, whether you're doing a retail pad or apartment building or whatever, And they're going to look at it just as we do if a project's viable. From a bank lender standpoint, they're going to do the same. They're actually going to take it a notch up because they want to make sure it's not only viable, but that there's room there for the debt payments, for example, to be made. So they're going to look at a site, they're going to run their own similar analysis. They're going to look at the traffic, local inventory, what do they essentially think the sign can generate? How much are they lending in order for that sign to get built? And is there enough revenue there to essentially substantiate the financing of that project?
So it's like a home mortgage lender or a small business lender in the sense that they're concerned with whether they're going to get paid back?
Yes, like most lenders, they would look at, either a debt service coverage ratio, a DSCR, or an LTV, a loan to value. What can it generate versus what is the required payment, call it monthly, or what is the actual value of the project? The loan to value would be the value of the actual project in the marketplace versus what they're loaning.
Now, you mentioned revenue before, and I think we talked about revenue a little bit in the context of financing and analysis as well. How does a billboard generate revenue?
It generates revenue through the sale of advertisements. So on a sign like this, and probably 99% of the other locations that we've developed over the past 15-plus years, it's pretty basic. If you're looking at a single sign structure with two digital faces, you look at how often the ad would rotate on a given face, which state PennDOT minimum is cannot change copy quicker than every 5 seconds. Here we would propose every 8 seconds. So if you take a given sign face, rotating every 8 seconds, that would afford you 8 advertising slots on a face. So now if you take 2 faces, that's 16 advertising slots on a given sign structure that could be sold to the market. Now for signage, LED signage, there's always a vacancy factor put in because a sign is never full. So if you have 16 slots available, you typically look at 30% vacancy, meaning 30% of the inventory, those 16 available slots, are not being sold to advertisers. So you essentially have, the inverse would be 70% occupancy on a given structure. So that 70% occupancy, then you look at what can you generate per ad slot, per ad that you're selling to a given advertiser for that 8 seconds on a face. You also have to factor in operating costs, utilities, any underlying real estate costs, ongoing maintenance, the sale of advertisement, there's commissions and so forth, and you essentially add on a factor of anywhere between 10 or 15%.
Let's talk briefly about the 30% vacancy. What happens to those slots?
For the most part, a lot of operators do it, and we've done it as well historically, is those can be offered up to a municipality for community messaging, can be offered up to nonprofits. It's available for emergency alerts, Amber alerts, and so forth, but that's inventory that's usually provided to, again, local communities or the municipality or groups in order for them to advertise whatever their message is and maybe couldn't go out and buy or purchase or would seek to buy or purchase that exposure.
As to the 70% that you can actually sell, what's going to determine the amount for which you can sell those slots?
Again, that's part of kind of the pro forma or value engineering process or viability of any given location. You have to look at existing inventory, what a sign you think in the area could generate, the traffic, the demographics. You essentially come up with a number and say, okay, I think an advertiser, a reasonable price, an advertiser would pay for this exposure. And they would look at all the factors that Dave had cited, which is how visible is it, what other inventories in the area, how many cars, and you essentially come up with an estimated number that you would go out to the market and look to sell that advertising.
When you're selling the advertising, what are the attributes that you present to a potential customer about the concerned visibility?
Right, so they're going to want to know at a given location, if I'm driving down that roadway, how many people are driving, how big is the sign, how close is the sign to the edge of the roadway. In our industry, although it may seem sometimes counterintuitive, from a municipality standpoint, you actually want it closer to the roadway. It makes visibility easier. It also allows you, if you are set back 50 feet versus 2 feet, for a sign face, it would have to be larger in order to be visible at 50 feet setback. So if you're close, you can minimize the sign to the point where it's the least amount needed to be viable. But they're looking at how visible is the sign, what's the sight line, how long can you see it? In the built environment, are there any obstructions in the way? And again, existing inventory in the area.
Mr. Schwartz, I think, mentioned that you can't, as a private sign company, enter into the PennDOT right-of-way for the parkway. Is that your understanding as well?
Correct.
And do customers understand that as well?
They do.
The sign that, I think Mr. Dice mentioned, that the sign that we're talking about here is a good bit larger than the 150 square feet that's permitted. Is there do you have an opinion as to the difference in the volume or the revenue that you could generate from the sign that we're proposing as opposed to a 150 square foot sign?
I honestly, personally, based on my experience, don't believe any revenue would be derived. I don't think anybody going along that roadway would pay for a message on a 150 square foot sign, and if they did, it would be nominal at best. Any given message has basic components. It has what's the company, what's the product or service they're advertising, and how do you contact that company. So for any given advertisement, whether you're on the bus shelter or on a billboard face, you need to convey at least those three main basic points. So there needs to be enough ad copy area in order to convey those. And it doesn't take a ton of writing to do that. You can use symbols and so forth, but there does need to be a sufficient amount of ad copy space in order to essentially get across those three main points.
Have you considered sign sizes that are smaller than 672 square feet
At this location?
at this location?
We have not.
Okay. Why not?
Well, we started with the fixed cost, the fixed CapEx cost just to access the site, again, for this use or any other use to be on this property. And when you start with that, you have to look at then what is a viable sign on that property. And when we do things like speed studies and we do things with Tantella like sightline analysis, we do all this in order to essentially estimate what is needed in order to make a viable project. When we actually first talked to this property owner, they were talking what a nuisance this parcel was. We actually ran into them not on purpose, and they said they have these parcels, there's nothing they can do with them. They were cut by the highway, they just have to sit there and pay the taxes on them. There's nothing they can do. So that was actually the impetus for us to then look at them, look at the viability, and we ran this whole analysis. I mean, we signed that purchase agreement in August of last year. We didn't make application until March or May. So you're talking easily 6 months of us running through this in-depth analysis as far as what is needed to make not only our proposed project viable, to make this property viable, because there's nothing else that can be done with it.
What are the risks that you consider in determining how large or small a sign you can afford to build, or for which you could get financing and build?
When you say the risks?
Let me rephrase that. Are there other factors that you consider other than the ones that we've discussed in deciding how large a sign or how small a sign you need to be able to build on a particular parcel in order to be able to finance and develop it?
I mean, there's a myriad of variables that have to be factored in, and I mean, outside of that, you always have the risk factor like you do for anything. For any project, any development of any sort, there's also market conditions you have to factor in. Market conditions, are ad sales up, are they down? Interest rates, are they up, are they down? There's a level of risk that you have to be willing to take, but you have to be able to account for all the factors that could make a project, forget profitable, viable. We're not here talking about how much profit we can make and does a bigger sign make more. Whether here it does or it doesn't, the 672 is the minimum needed to make this viable. Could we have asked for 1,200 or 19 by 60? We could have. Could that have generated more revenue? Possibly. There would be more CapEx, but we don't need a 960 or 1,200 square foot sign to make this property viable, we do need 672.
And you heard, you were here last month, you heard Mr. Tantella's testimony about sightlines and safety considerations. Are those consistent with your experience in 30 years in this industry?
Yes, the 15 combined, our partners are 35 years.
35 years, I'm sorry.
But yes, and that's why we run through those analyses. And we're not the only ones that do it. I mean, if you look at Allegheny County and you look at every sign on the interstate highways, so we actually went into the HBMS system, which is Highway Beautification Management System. It's a system that PennDOT uses to essentially catalog, track all of the billboards in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So you can go into that system and we can pull up every sign that's on an interstate in Allegheny County. So if you pull that up and you run essentially, you look at all those locations, you have, I think it's 51 billboard locations, comprising of 93 faces, because some are single, some are double. You take the average of those 93 faces on the interstate in Allegheny County and run the math on the size of those sign faces, it comes out to 699.5 feet. That tells you right there that on an interstate highway, a 6-lane highway, the appropriate size is in that range of 672 or higher. We don't need higher because that average brings you to almost 700. That again just shows you that that's the appropriate, I mean, that's what's been here, that's what works. Much smaller than that is not going to be built. Here especially is not going to be viable given the fixed CapEx.
And that study, or that data that you referred to from the Highway Beautification System, that's the document that's attached, it's in our exhibit book, is Exhibit West 14?
I believe, yes, it is.
Okay. And you heard Mr. Lamberger's testimony about customers designing their creative content for particular sizes. Is that consistent with your experience in the industry?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think I have any further questions right now. Thank you. The board may have some.
Okay.
Would you consider other parcels along the parkway besides these two that you have under purchase contract?
When you say, would we consider?
Have you?
Have we? We have not. If there was an available parcel that was available and could be used, but we would still need the same relief essentially. And when I say same relief, you have a fixed capital expenditure here you might not have somewhere else. But that size, as I go back to citing the signs along parkways and so forth, at 672 is the appropriate size for that. We have not considered any others, if that's what you're asking.
The billboard going towards Penn Hills, that I think is in Penn Hills itself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the size of that billboard?
I believe that's 672. Is that yes, that's 672.
Thank you.
Have you looked at the other uses in the C2 district as to whether or not any structures could be built there?
We look to the professionals to do that. I mean, we can do it from a pedestrian or
Well, let's
experience.
answer my question. Did you do it?
We did look at it, yes.
Okay, so you saw all the C2 uses that are permitted.
Mhm.
And are any of those available to be built on this site?
To our understanding, no, they're not.
You're saying that those uses, none of those can be built on that site?
To our understanding, none can.
Okay, your understanding, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is we have the experience to look at an ordinance, apply the bulk regulations and say, okay, what can be done conforming?
What if I wanted to put an ice cream stand up on one of the parcels? And I got $10 billion and I'm going to spend it on it.
Mhm.
Are you telling me that we couldn't do that?
Again, I would look to, there's a certain level of review that.
Certain level of review,
That we can do, and then if we go to a professional and say, okay, we don't think that an ice cream parlor could conform here, right, under the ordinance. Are you talking could conform
I'm
or
not talking
physically
about
be
making a
built?
profit, I'm talking about building it.
Okay, so could
You-
you re-ask your
you-
question,
okay.
I'm sorry?
Everything you've testified to, and some of the other witnesses, all is driven by money. It's driven by profit.
It's driven
I
by
appreciate-
viability, not profit, viability.
What I'm asking is, could we put an ice cream store down there and spend a whole bunch of money on it and have it open? Notwithstanding, it's maybe a bad investment.
I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I have a question. What is the attraction of this location? If I was spending money and I found out I had to spend $1 million just to build a bridge and make everything to build over there first before even putting up the signs, I would be looking more toward the city where cars are not going 70 miles an hour and sitting at the parkway waiting to go into the tunnels, and they're only going 10, 15, 20 miles an hour, 5 days a week. Did you guys look at all down that way?
I mean, we're always looking for opportunities. I think as I had mentioned earlier, this is actually a property in conversation. The company that owns this is actually local to where we live.
Okay.
And this came as a byproduct of speaking with them about properties and our business, their business, and them essentially saying, we have these properties that are effectively condemned unless something can be done with them. And we don't think there's anything that can be done with them. And that's when we looked at it and started this whole analysis that we've walked through to say, could it be done and could it be viable? And in our estimation, based on what's proposed, it could be.
Am I correct that presently you have agreements of sale on these?
Correct.
Or something like an agreement
We're
of
the
sale?
equitable owner, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Dice, I think that's actually Exhibit 2 to our exhibit book.
It was in one of your exhibits.
Yeah.
Wolfgate Devco versus OWPH Devco LLC. How are they related?
Yes, so OWPH LLC is a subsidiary of Wolfgate Devco.
Thank you.
They are wholly owned by Wolfgate Devco LLC.
Based in Philly?
Well, it's a Pennsylvania LLC. We are based in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
Okay.
But we developed in Philadelphia, developed in the Harrisburg, Pittsburgh area, or across the state.
Sharon, do you need a break?
I
Or-
could use one.
Okay.
yes.
Mr. Gull, how much more do we have as far as
This is
new
our last
testimony?
witness for this site.
Okay.
And the break might help given Mr. Dice's invitation to sort of incorporate the record from
Yes.
this site's hearing into the next site's hearing, we could probably use the break to skinny down what we're going to present.
Let's do that. Let's
Thank you.
take, we'll take a recess for
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Thank you.
And, Mr. Chair, I should ask, oh, I'm sorry.
We're back in session. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Gall.
Mr. Chair, I should ask, we have concluded our presentation as to the first site. To the extent necessary, I'd ask the exhibits that we've offered be moved into evidence. Question I have for the second hearing is, do we need to swear the witnesses again?
We do not. If everybody is, if there's nobody new that's going to be speaking.
They'll be the same.
And Mr. Dice, without exception?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
We'll adopt it. When you say we're incorporating all of the testimony from last time and this time for the 6 through 10.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thanks. With that, I guess we'd start again with Mr. Tantala.
Can you make an offer of what he's going to say that he didn't say already?
What's really different, we will not again discuss Mr. Tantala's qualifications, what he did.
Can you make
I'm
an
just
offer of what
yeah,
you
I'm running through this to see how I can best say this. And let me put it this way, Mr. Dice. This is a separate site. It has a separate site plan. The improvements are going to be a little different. There are a few locational things that are a little different. For instance, when he looked at the work that Mr. Schwartz had done on the zoning overlay and the slopes, that's going to be a little different for this site. I think to the extent that they're different sites, he still has to talk about some of them, and that he came to essentially the same, what are really the same conclusions about size and speed along the roadway.
Well, we're at 9:10, or 9:15 right now, and last time we had a 10 o'clock cutoff, and we're going to try to stick to that same thing. So do you think you can, everything summarized, or?
I think we can. Let me ask, do you have a Mr. Tantala, do you have a copy of the survey that's more? Let me just start with this and see how quickly we can go through this, if we can.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Mr. Tantala, do you have a copy of the survey that is marked as exhibit number 3 for the east property now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and is it fair to say that you have visited this property and prepared for your testimony this evening on this property in the same way as you did for the previous properties?
Yes, sir.
And this is the survey that you reviewed in connection with this?
Yes, sir.
Again, just briefly, we've talked about this a little bit before, but are there unusual features to this property?
Yes, sir.
What are those?
It's an irregularly shaped lot, approximately 300 feet wide by 70 feet on one end and 160 feet on the other end. It has frontages on 2 routes along Interstate 376 and also along Old William Penn Highway to the north, Interstate 376 to the south. The nearest lanes are westbound. The site is bisected, again, by Leak Run into 2 narrow sections. So this is Leak Run coming through here. 22% of the site is within the 100-year floodplain, 14%, 100-year floodplains delineated by this double dash line. And then 14% of the site is the floodway delineated by this dashed line, which again bisects the site. The balance of the property, which is not inundated by these features, has extreme slopes. Those slopes are colored to reference the green are the greatest slopes, greater than 35% slope. I'm sorry, the green are between 25 and 35%, and that's approximately 18.9% of the total lot area. The red is slopes greater than 35%, more steep, represents approximately 56.2% of the lot area.
Okay. Mr. Tantala, I think when we were talking about the earlier parcel, I asked you about the impact of these conditions on the development of the property, and you described that parcel as being very constrained. Would you agree with that characterization for this parcel as well?
In my professional opinion, yes, sir.
And among the documents that you reviewed this evening, I'm sorry?
There were other constraints, but that's.
Oh, okay. Well, just very quickly, can you tell us what those are, and we can flip back to the survey?
PennDOT has slope easements along the interstate. Those slope easements are delineated here. They represent about 7% of the lot. There's no access from I-376, so the only way to access it is from Old William Penn Highway. There's also an 80-foot wide utility easement which goes through and bisects the property between those two routes. And there are significant topographic challenges which are represented by those steep slopes and other factors.
Okay. Any other constraints on development that, from the survey that we haven't discussed?
I think that, there's a significant setback from the interstate as well. But I think that there's guardrails in and along here, but I think that represents the bulk of constraints.
Okay. Exhibit 6 I'll represent to you is the same sort of study of usable space that environmental planning and design performed for the other site. Did you have an opportunity to review these documents for this site as well?
Yes, sir.
And were you here when Mr. Schwartz testified as to how his firm prepared this study for the first site?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And does that accord with your understanding of how this study for this second site was also prepared?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What does this study show to you, or what is your understanding of this study?
Mr. Schwartz's study and analysis is essentially an overlay analysis, which includes overlaying these site constraints and features. They include coloring in these slopes between 25 and 30 and above 35%. They delineate and hatch in the 100-year floodplain with a light blue hatch, the regulatory floodway with a solid blue hatch, the body of water itself, and he's also imposed minimum yard requirements and building setbacks identified by these various colors and representations, which show this site as encumbered by those constraints.
Okay. And if we flip to the second page of this exhibit, what do you understand that diagram to represent?
This is the starting point of the first set of overlays, which include the 100-year floodplain, the regulatory floodway, and the body of water.
Okay. And the third page of this exhibit, what do you understand that to be?
This is specific to the slopes between 25 and 35% and greater than 35%, orange and red respectively.
Okay. Moving along, what do we see on the following page for this site?
This is him showing the minimum yard setback lines and the building setback lines, and hatching them in as areas that satisfy those, that would satisfy those yard requirements, and areas that satisfy building setback and yard requirements.
Okay. And am I correct that the salmon-colored area satisfies the yard requirements but not the building requirements, and the pink area satisfies both?
That is correct.
And the next page, what do you understand this to be?
This is the result of Mr. Schwartz's overlay analysis. When you look at all those layers overlaid, what's left is a remaining area that satisfies these yard requirements and natural limitations. It's shown here in red. It's effectively an area of 58.87 square feet with a width of 4.46 feet. Approximately 0.16% of the total property area satisfies the available area.
So 0.16%, not 1.6%.
Correct, 0.16%.
Okay. I think with regard to the earlier site, both you and Mr. Wolfington indicated that that parcel was left over from the condemnation of property to build the parkway in the 1950s. Is that your understanding as to how this parcel was created in its present form as well?
Yes, in 1960, as evidenced by the condemnation documents and other DOT documents, this parcel was a remnant from that condemnation, and it's remained vacant since 1960.
Okay. And we're going to take a look back to Exhibit 4. And Exhibit 16, I'm sorry, Exhibit 15 is similar to that in that it's the site plan for this parcel, but Exhibit 15 also has the mile markers on it. Your understanding is that OWP, the applicant, is proposing to build a billboard on this property?
Yes, the applicant's proposing a billboard located here within this exhibit, some grading, and a stream crossing.
Okay. And this property is also zoned C2?
Yes, as identified in the zoning table, it tabulates it and lists it as zone C2.
And you told us before, with regard to the other site, that you have reviewed the Monroeville zoning ordinance.
Yes.
Is a billboard a permitted use on this property in the C2 district?
By special exception.
Okay. Not a permitted use, but special exception?
Yes, sir.
Conditional use.
I'm
Conditional-
sorry. Conditional use. Point taken. Sorry. And did you have a chance to review Table C to the Monroeville zoning ordinance, which contains the minimum yard and setback requirements for C2 uses?
Yes.
And did you have a chance to review the billboard regulations in Section 359-27 of the zoning ordinance?
Yes, sir.
And to your understanding, what relief is the applicant seeking here from these yard requirements and conditional use requirements?
For the front yard, the requirement is a 10-foot minimum setback. They're proposing a 2-foot setback provided. For the billboard height and size, in terms of the sign face area, which is shown here as an elevation view, what's permitted is 150 square feet of area, and what's provided is 672 square feet proposed. The sign face dimensions themselves, 10 vertical dimension by 15 horizontal dimension is permitted. A 14-foot vertical dimension by 48-foot horizontal dimension is proposed. Additionally, the maximum height above the roadway, 24 feet, is permitted. And what's proposed above the roadway is 39 feet. It's tabulated in the zoning table of the site plan. And that's mainly to overcome, to make the sign visible, to overcome the topographic constraints. The overall height of the sign is proposed to be 49 feet, effectively 39 feet above the roadway.
Okay. And there's also a request for variance from the maximum diameter of the monopole support?
Yes, this structure is a V structure, so it's called a partial flag sign. It's supported by a single pole. What's permitted is a 3-foot diameter. The 3.5 feet at the base is proposed.
Now, you testified earlier as to the reasons for that a half-foot variance was needed for the diameter of the monopole. The reasons you gave for the other site, would those be the same as for this site?
Yes, sir.
Let's talk a little bit further about the other variances that we're requesting here. And take a look at Exhibit 8, which is a sightline analysis that you prepared for this site, which will look similar to the sightline analysis that you performed for the others, for the previous site. Now, you told us with regard to this particular site, when we were discussing the earlier site, you told us the process that you used in developing the exhibit we saw as West 8. Did you use that same process in developing this 3-page analysis or this 3-page exhibit we're seeing now?
Yes, sir.
And as with the prior site, you reviewed the speed study that was provided by the traffic engineer for this site?
Yes, sir.
And that's Exhibit 5? If we want to flip back. Thank you. That's the August 2, 2023 study from Mr. Hato and Worcester Traffic Engineers that's marked as Exhibit East 5?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And the other resources that you consulted, were they similar to the resources that you consulted in preparing Exhibit West 8?
Yes, sir.
So again, if you can remind us, let's walk through the Exhibit East 8 very, very quickly and remind the board of what exactly is in this exhibit.
So the first page of this exhibit shows the westbound view of the east sign generally proposed in this area. This view is taken 800 feet in advance of the sign, approximately 10 seconds in advance of that sign of travel time. The lower view shows the eastbound view, or the cross read, reading across the westbound traffic for eastbound at about the same distance. I've summarized here relative top of face and bottom of face elevations relative to grade elevations, and I've pointed out some features in their relative elevations. In the westbound view, there's a raised grade and a fence area there, and I've identified its point elevation. And then in the eastbound view, I've identified the grade elevation at approximately the distance of where the sign would be located.
That's the second page,
That's that page.
okay?
The second page is a cone of vision analysis. It shows the sign location at the center of the page. This is a vertical view, and this is a horizontal or plan view. So the sign's represented here in each location, and it gives relative distances, effectively 6 seconds, 8 seconds, 10 seconds, and 12 seconds in advance of those signs in each direction, in both vertical and horizontal. And what these show are a driver, as they start to get close to the sign, approximately 10 seconds or so, will notice the sign at a distance, cue in their mind that there's a sign at the distance. As they get closer to that sign, they will look up to see it, or down to see it, depending on which direction you're going. Similarly, in the horizontal view, they'll look over to see it, and over to see it. And this calculates, per the speed study, what these distances are, what these travel times are, and what their viewing angles for the driver would be. And it establishes, is this sign located in an appropriate cone of vision? That is to say, does the driver have to look too far over or too far up to see the sign as they approach it? So as you have a greater and greater setback, the sign requires more and more to look over to see. As you have a higher sign, or relative to the elevation, a lower sign, depending on which direction you're going, is it a comfortable line of sight view in terms of that cone of vision as you're traveling along it? Again, driver experience notices it at a distance, affords enough time to take furtive glances to read it if they choose to read it, get close enough to the sign and pass it to where they're not reading it. So we want them to read it in a certain hotspot per this analysis, and that's part of why it has to be a certain height and a certain size.
And I think you told us before that that relates to both the commercial viability of the sign and highway safety?
There's been testimony about the commercial viability relative to safety. You want a sign not for the sign company's sake, but for the driver's sake. Is it large enough for them to read it at the distances that they need to read it? Will they notice it? Will it be conspicuous? Will it be legible? Not just at the distances that they're reading it, but at the speeds that they're traveling. So you've heard testimony about, on the commercial side, that this is, most of the signs along the interstate are this size, and there's a reason for that from a transportation perspective, in that they have to be large enough to be read at the speeds that the drivers are traveling. Smaller signs are more appropriate for lower speed roads, single lane roads. This is an interstate, multiple lanes, higher speeds, as demonstrated by the speed study. So these values are all linked: the speed, the height, the size, the setback, and then the other part of this analysis, which is the next sheet, has to do with, is it obstructed? Does it clear anything that would block the sign from being read appropriately for the driver if they choose to read it? The best sign is one that's close to the right-of-way and within that cone of vision. And if there's a huge setback as required by the right-of-way, if there's other features that the sign has to go up higher to be read and be read at longer distances, or if they're higher speeds, then that sign has to be larger and higher to be appropriate for the driver. And quite frankly, that's why PennDOT permits up to 1,200 square feet for permitting of these types of signs, particularly for higher speed routes. This 14 by 48 is a minimum for this type of configuration and these speeds.
I think I cut you off on the way to page 3. What's on page 3?
Yes, sir. Page 3 is the next part of that analysis, where I essentially have taken a point cloud of the entire area, which is elevations of everything in this area for both signs, but we're talking about the east sign now. And that allows me, with a high degree of precision, to do section slices of what that driver's line of sight would be. So this is a 3D model, and it's, again, demonstrating those approach distances in advance of the sign. And summarized below, I have a line of sight, D to D, line of sight for the east sign, westbound view, that if I were a driver 10 seconds out at this point, my eye would be approximately 3.5 feet above the grade of the road, the interstate, and I draw a line directly to the center of the face. And really, that demonstrates that, is this sign high enough to clear its major obstruction, which is the top of fence, which I showed in page 1 of this exhibit. There are other features in and along here, but this is a clear line of sight along this section cut that shows what the driver would see, and is it high enough to afford them to be able to notice it at a distance, read and take glances as they're driving along and keeping their eyes on the road, and then get closer and have enough time to read that message. Profile CC just gives a section cut along where the sign is placed and shows it relatively. It's in a valley. There are a number of trees in the area that buffer this sign, but it's shown in a valley between these two routes. And it's in a valley predominantly because of that, the leak run and the other site features which I previously discussed.
Now, we talked about some of the reasons why these variances are necessary in the context of the other site, but we need to talk about them for this site as well. Why wouldn't this site work with a 10-foot setback? Why does it need to have a variance from the setback requirement?
Because initially, the sign has a significant setback from the road just to the property line. So it's not as if the property line is coincident with the right-of-way or coincident with the route. It has to overcome that setback just to begin with. So the closer I can place the sign to the road translates into less time over that a driver's eye has to glance, and more time that they can spend with their eyes on the road. That's specific to the setback. Similarly, with the height, to overcome certain obstacles, the extreme changes in elevation, along with the local changes in elevation of the site itself, that board has to be a height enough that it cannot accommodate, not just accommodate locally, but 10 seconds out where the driver starts to notice that sign and read it. The further you set back, the more a driver has to glance their eye over at these higher speeds. It translates into more time off the road. That's not for the sign company's benefit, that's for the driver's benefit.
Now, Mr. Dice, when we were talking about the earlier sites, he raised a few questions. He noted that a 2-foot setback is essentially relief of 80% from the 10% yard that's required in the ordinance. Could some lesser variance work here?
In my professional opinion, no, because the further you set back, then you encounter a lot of these tree features that will obstruct the view more, which, because all these factors are linked, you might have to go higher to overcome those trees further setback as you move that sign back. So this accomplishes the purpose of accommodating the driver's line of sight for an already significant setback from the start, and permits the driver enough time to read that sign as they approach it.
And is there a reason that we couldn't do a smaller variance from height? We're doing from 24 to 39 feet. Is there a reason why we wouldn't be able to do a smaller variance than that?
Yes, similarly, there's a difference in elevation at this location that you have to come up to just to get the sign at grade with the interstate. So it's approximately 10 feet before the top of the sign would even reach the graded interstate here, let alone the change in grade in advance of that location where the driver would start to read it, let alone all the lower sight features and obstructions that would afford a clear line of sight. So to push it down anymore would be obstructed by other features in this site. It would not afford a driver enough time, and that 10 seconds would be significantly reduced the lower you make the sign.
When we were discussing the earlier site, you expressed some safety concerns with the idea of putting a 10 by 15, 150-foot square foot sign in this area. For that site, do you share those same concerns with this site?
In my professional opinion, yes. As I've previously testified, a sign has to be conspicuous, it has to be legible, it has to be appropriate for the traveled speeds on the right-of-way. That may be more appropriate for lower speed roads, single-lane roads, but at the distances drivers are traveling, it means that this dimension's getting longer and further out. They need the time and the distance to be able to read that. Because they're so far back, a smaller sign would not be noticeable, conspicuous, or legible. So to conform with the requirements of height and size would be a sign that would not be reasonably read by drivers at these speeds and would not be appropriate.
And you were here when Mr. Lemberger testified earlier?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lemberger talked about a standard sign size that is 10 feet 6 inches by 36 feet. Would that be, in your professional opinion, would that be appropriate for this site?
In my professional opinion, no. And I think the evidence of the other signs that are permitted by PennDOT permits larger sizes in this area. The average size testimony was provided previously of all the signs on interstates in this region exceed what's proposed here on average, because there's some smaller. For this 6-lane environment, for these speeds that are recorded in the speed study, and the distances at which they have to be read, this 14 by 48 would be the low bar for this type of road and this environment.
Are there other signs of size, excuse me, let me try that again. Are there other sizes of signs that might potentially work at this property that are smaller than 672 square feet?
In my professional opinion, no. The larger signs would work, but this is, appropriate, 14 by 48.
When we were discussing the other site, you talked about whether these proposed signs would affect the character of the neighborhood in which they're located or impair the use or development of adjacent property. You told us a little bit about the sign technology and about baffling and shielding. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, sir.
Would you express those same opinions with regard to this site and the technology and the design that's proposed?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, if I could have just a second.
Sure.
Thanks.
Anybody bring snacks?
Mr. Chantella, thank you for coming in again. I don't have any more questions for you, but as before, the board may have some questions.
Yes, sir.
Weird question. This is based upon the traffic studies that the speeds are in excess of 55, 70-ish. If we had a wand and everybody went 55, what would the ideal sign be for this area, size-wise?
First, I would say no such wand exists, but to suspend belief, because it's an interstate, the multi-lane environment, and 55 miles per hour, even at those speeds, this size is appropriate. When you introduce more than one lane, you have potential for people changing lanes. 55 miles per hour is still a higher speed. It's the posted speed limit, but the speed study, as you'll see, has recorded speeds above 70 miles per hour. I believe the 85th percentile speed was 73 miles per hour. So even at the lower speeds, I feel that this would be an appropriate size sign. These dimensions might change a little bit, but you're still going to have to overcome various barriers in terms of line of sight. And then to go back to the previous exhibit, even if these distances get smaller, these angles increase slightly, but not so much that you're outside the cone of vision.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Tantella? Anybody?
A little bit. So I understand that you have given us your professional opinion as to these various distances that are needed for people to see the signs. Is it possible to build a sign on these sites that is compliant with our zoning ordinance, but would violate all of your reasons for not making it bigger? You understand my question?
It's an odd question because it's not a reasonable use. You could bury a
That's your
sign.
opinion.
You could,
Okay.
if a sign isn't viewed, it's not a use.
Well, that's your opinion.
Yes, sir.
Now, could it be built and comply with Monroeville zoning ordinance? Not the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's ordinances, or PennDOT, or any of that, but comply with Monroeville's ordinance.
But it's an odd question because it has to comply with those things.
I'm sorry?
It's an odd question because it has to comply with PennDOT. Proper design should afford a driver, irrespective of what the sign company wants, enough time to read that sign, enough time to
Are
see
you
it,
saying that it
and not be
couldn't be built?
obstructed.
Are you saying the sign couldn't be built
You could
in
build,
accordance with Monroeville's zoning ordinance?
it would not be a reasonable use. You could build
Okay,
anything.
You continue to use that word. I didn't ask you that. I asked you whether or not it could be built, even if it's unreasonable.
You're
I just wanna
effectively
know.
asking, could you break the law? I mean, yes, you could, but it would be an unreasonable use.
Okay, so it could be built.
It's not recommended, it's not appropriate, it's
Understand,
not consistent with
understand.
safe driving regulations.
Okay, have you looked at all the other C2 uses that are permitted as a matter of right?
Yes, and
And are you saying that none of those uses can be made of this property?
the planner is going to speak to that as well, but if you're asking me, I don't see a reasonable use that could fit this property. Given all these constraints, the limitations that I've mentioned, the extreme topography,
I think one of the uses is agricultural.
There's agricultural, forestry, but even like a small pizza shop or ice cream
Would you
shop.
put
was
something like
mentioned.
that on one of these sites?
in my professional opinion, no. The planner can speak to that as well, per
Is
his
the reason-
analysis.
Is the reason you're saying no is because economically it wouldn't make sense?
My opinions are irrespective of the economics of it. You've had experts or others testify here about the economics of it. I don't analyze, is it fiscally feasible for a sign company? I analyze, is it visible, line of sight? Is it consistent with traffic analysis, cone of vision? And I look at all the constraints
What
on
if-
these features per the survey.
What if I got out of the sign business for a second and said,
Yes, sir.
hey, I want to build a little ice cream store down there, and I'm willing to spend $10 million to get it done. You saying that can't be done? That's a permitted use.
That use would require additional things. You might require parking, you would require access. You're not going to put the ice cream in the floodway or the floodplain. The DEP has requirements on
understand.
restrictions, but that's more of a planner question, and he can address that.
Okay.
But I speak to the
So
nuts
that's
and
not
bolts
your
of the
forte.
engineering.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's all.
I had a sightline question. You know, the variance for the 10-foot front yard setback, would that be able to be eliminated if they purchased a property and regraded the site and cut down trees?
Well, in this site, there's a significant, in addition to the setback where the property line begins, there's a PennDOT slope easement. So those are easements that you can't build in and along that area, and that's why the sign is proposed to be a flag structure so that it doesn't violate that slope easement that goes across. Those PennDOT slope easements are to protect the interstate and its construction so that it's not undermined. So that goes hand in hand with the limit of setback. Really, the pole is set further back than the sign face, which is above. But in the strict interpretation, we're representing this as 2 feet to the face. The face is in the air. The pole is set further back. For this specific location, the pole is 35 feet back more than that 2 feet. So the start of the center of the pole is 37 feet back from the property line. The edge of face is 2 feet back from the property line.
I'm just gonna come up real quick and
Yes, sir.
put this on.
Let's move that.
Okay.
I make my life flyer.
So I'm just looking at this exhibit that we had earlier, and that little gray spot would be a conforming sign. I was just wondering, you know, if that's the property, could that be regraded, those trees removed, and then you'd be able to see that sign?
That's the other parcel.
This is
right?
the other parcel, sir. We're talking about the east location in this, that's the west parcel. I believe
We do have something similar that I think you should have over there.
Okay.
you'll get
But
the
yeah.
experience.
Either way, you're still asking for a setback on this one, setback variance, so the question's still relevant, just the previous, one of the previous applications. But could that be regraded, and then you wouldn't need that setback variance?
Again, I think the similar constraints apply in that location where there are slope easement requirements. And I can speak to that if I pull up my file from the other location. But you're going to have similar PennDOT slope easement requirements and a significant setback. Additionally.
I was just trying to say
Yeah.
you need a variance.
Yep. Want me to get mine?
Sorry? No. Well, there was just a question about the last hearing. Okay, that's fine. Okay. All right. I just have a couple of housekeeping questions. First, you understand that you're still under oath here?
Yes, sir.
And the testimony that you just gave was in the understanding that you're still under oath?
Yes, sir.
And the opinions that you expressed here, do you hold them to a reasonable degree of professional certainty as an engineer?
Yes, sir.
I don't have any further questions for you this evening, Mr. Tantala. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
We'd call Mr. Hato again to testify about this site.
Welcome.
Good evening.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Mr. Hato, you understand that you're still under oath here?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And the site that you are here to testify about now, if we look at the document marked as Exhibit East 1, do you recognize the outlined site as that site?
Yes, I do.
And you're here to testify about traffic on this section?
Correct.
Okay. Which is down the road from the section you previously testified about?
Correct.
And you understand this board previously accepted you as an expert in traffic engineering and in the billboard permitting process?
Yes, sir.
The PennDOT regulations that would control the placement of a billboard at this site, those are the same as for the previous site?
Yes.
You can take a look at a document we briefly looked at with Mr. Tantala. It's marked as Exhibit East 5.
Okay.
Can you tell us what this document is?
Yes. This is a report that I performed and composed. It is a speed study which identifies the actual traveling speeds on 376 around the Parkway in the vicinity of this site.
Is this a different study from the one that we looked at as Exhibit West 5 earlier?
It is a different study, but the same methodology.
Okay.
Yes, different location.
The same methodology that you described before, that's what you did here?
Exactly. Exactly.
And what was the conclusion of this study?
The 85th percentile speeds in this area were observed to be 73 miles per hour versus the posted speed limit of 55 miles per hour.
So 15% of the traffic is traveling faster than 73 miles an hour? I'm sorry.
85% of traffic is correct.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
It's the
You
hour.
asked it in kind of a weird way. Yes, correct.
Okay. And if we can look at Exhibit 12, which is buried down here a little bit.
Okay.
This is also a study that you prepared?
Correct.
And is this the same study that we saw previously as Exhibit West 12?
Same methodology, different location, but yes, same type of study, yes.
And can you remind the board or tell the board what the purpose was of this particular study?
This study evaluated the accident rate in this segment of the Parkway, compared it to average rates for similar roadway facilities in the Commonwealth.
And how does this section of roadway compare with other limited access highways in the Commonwealth?
The accident rate in this location is lower than averages for the state,
Okay.
meaning that this segment of roadway is not inherently any more dangerous than any other segment of roadway.
And if we can look back at Exhibit East 11, I believe that is the same crash study that you performed with regard to the existing billboard in the area?
Correct.
Okay. So your testimony with regard to this billboard for this, about this exhibit for this site would be the same as what you testified to last month?
Correct.
And your opinions as to the speed along the section of highway near this site and the accident rate in the vicinity of this site, do you hold those to a reasonable degree of certainty as a traffic engineer?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Hato, I don't think I have any additional questions for you right now. The board may have some.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would- Do we have just a second?
Really?
A little warmer in here. Played with the thermostat? Yep.
We're going to recall Mr. Schwartz, if we may.
Sure. You're still under oath.
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz, I am going to show you a copy of an exhibit that the board has as Exhibit East 15.
Yes.
This is similar to the study that you performed for the site that we discussed earlier?
Yes.
Okay. And this is the study that shows the way a permitted billboard would appear as opposed to the way our proposed billboard would
Correct.
appear.
So again, in the upper left corner, the distance from where the sign location actually is about 825 feet. Again, that's all calculated on travel distance and speed. The gray rectangle that's kind of squarish is, the counselor had just stated, is representing what would be in conformance with the current ordinance.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. We're going to mark this as Exhibit East 20, and I'm going to ask you to do the same thing on page 1 of this that you did with West 20. Could you just circle the,
Billboard?
yes, and just make sure that we can see it, draw an arrow to it? And what is the second page of this exhibit?
This is showing the requested variance in terms of dimensional standards for that. Again, same distance, same travel speed, et cetera, in terms of the calculation. And again, that billboard, when you're looking at, I think somebody had asked a question earlier, I think it was Paul, this location is really, it's close to the edge of the max construction property line, so in that. And so it gives good context with the building sign that's over on Max's building in terms of what the actual scale of that billboard is. The Max construction is actually bigger.
Okay, if you, just to close the loop on this, if you could just circle the
Yes.
proposed billboard on this and make sure that there's an arrow or something that shows us where it is. Okay, if we could set aside that exhibit. Now you have laid out Exhibit East 6, which is the, Mr. Tantella testified that you prepared this study as well?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you prepare this study in the same manner that you prepared the exhibit we saw earlier as West 6?
Yes.
So this, the same methodology, the
Yes.
same overlays?
Yes, taking all the customary standards that are in your ordinance, in terms of restrictions, those types of things, and just overlaying them over top of each other. First and foremost, to try to determine where there's available buildable land. Again, that's independent upon any land use. So on the east site, just like the west site, the buildable area or available land was the white area. And if you look at the east site, there is none. The entire property has some sort of encumbrance. And yes, we do call this a hardship analysis. I know you had raised the question earlier whether floodplain constituted a hardship. After that question came up, I went back and checked your ordinance, and yes, read it, it is a hardship.
Okay. And you were here when Mr. Tantella described the various pages, or his understanding of the various pages of this exhibit?
Yes, yeah,
Did he get it right?
yes.
Let's take a look at the last page. I just want to focus in on one particular point on this, This is the last page of Exhibit East 6. And again, there's a little sort of pink or salmon-colored trapezoid.
Yes.
And Mr. Tantala said that that was the only area of the property that was buildable, consistent with both the conditional use ordinance for billboards and the yard restrictions?
Correct. Again, billboard is treated a little differently than the other uses that are permitted within that C2 district. You can't build a building in that, but I can build a billboard in that.
Okay. And I think Mr. Tantala said that was 58 square feet?
58 square feet.
And between 1/10 and 2/10 of the percent of the area of the
something
parcel?
like that, right.
Okay. Now, I believe you told us before that you'd had the opportunity to review the list of permitted and conditional uses in the C2 district?
Yes.
Okay. In your professional opinion, is there any use that's identified as either a permitted or conditional use in that area that would require the same or less relief from the zoning ordinance that we're asking for with this billboard here?
The only, can I grab my?
Sure.
The only one that comes to mind would be the utility, like a lift station. I can't remember what you call that. Paul, do you remember what that's called?
A substation?
Yeah, I think, yeah, utility substation. That would be about the only one that would be on par with the same relief of the billboard. All the other ones have to go through literally all the variances that are basically, we're discussing plus more. And the question was raised earlier, if you go back to your west plan, so the site that we looked at earlier, I think the solicitor asked the question, and we used the hypothetical, can I build an ice cream shop? Okay, key thing to look on that one is purple line. Ice cream shop implies that there's a building, a structure, okay? The purple line that is kind of the donut hole in the middle of that map is actually the building setback. The only intersection, overlap of white area, which is buildable land, and where the building, we would be within the building setback, is the little area number 6, which equates to 87, 88 square feet.
Okay.
If I could build an ice cream shop at 87 square feet, I can do it. I'm not sure I could have a publicly habitable space at 87 square feet.
Okay.
In your opinion?
I think the building code would control that.
Okay. Mr. Schwartz, I don't think I have any further questions for you right now. The board may have some.
Thank you. Don't see any.
Thank you. Viking? I'm sorry.
Not again. We're not doing
One
it
matter.
again. Okay, it's 10 o'clock.
Yeah, it's.
Okay.
What we're going to do is keep the record open.
I think we're done.
Okay. Are you resting?
We're resting.
Okay.
Yes.
We're going to keep the record open until next month. You've got a lot of material to get through individually. When's our next meeting, Paul?
First Wednesday. I
Okay.
don't know the date offhand.
All right. Be
Did I get
prepared
that?
to discuss the matter next month.
October
If there's
4th.
need for any additional testimony, we'll put it in then. And otherwise, you'll make decisions next month on this, on the 10 different variances.
It'd be October 4th.
October 4th. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
all right.
Long couple nights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like a motion for adjournment, please.
Make a motion, adjourn.
Second?
I'll second that motion.
Motion seconded. All in
Wait,
favor?
wait, wait,
Whoops, I'm sorry.
Let's not adjourn, let's just continue this matter. We'll make the
Do
motion
we
to.
need a table? Do we need a table?
No, just make a motion to continue the matter until next month.
Okay. You have a motion to continue this item until, these matters until next month.
I'll make the motion to continue.
A second?
Second.
Motion seconded. All in favor of continuing till next month, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Yes, no?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn this.
Second?
I'll second that motion.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.